A warm welcome to everybody here on one of the best events this Saturday night in Oslo. A very interesting team of 3 speakers, whereas Helge Joheim, professor at the university, and writer, editor, and head of the board of the Litteraturhuset will be the host for tonight. My name is Sabine Richter, and it might sound a little bit strange, a German in the Norwegian Litteraturhuset trying to introduce something on pidgin English, but we try. Everyone is very knowledgeable in languages. And we are very happy also to have Ingrid Brekke here with us. All 3 of them speak excellent German, but of one reason or the other, this event is in English. Ingrid has published 2 very interesting books, Da Øst blev Vest, when the East became the West, Europa etter kommunismens fall, Europe after the fall of communism, and of course her biography of Angela Merkel, which I'm very much looking forward to read. Maybe some of you have already read that. And we welcome Volker Kutscher. I think he has reached stardom already, because there's so many medias which are pushing your name up in the sky, in the literary sky. And although we all consume books passionately, we love films as well. And some of you might now have the opportunity to meet for the first time the man who is behind the films, which has written Der nasse Fisch, The Naked Fish, or The Wet Fish. The wet fish. No. This is number 1 in a series of up to now 7 books. Is that correct? 7?
Yes.
Yeah?
7.
So, but tonight, our topic is not Babylon Berlin explicitly. We might touch the subject, but our topic deals with the past again, a kind of Vergangenheitsbewältigung, of which the Germans amongst you know everything about, some Norwegians as well, difficult to translate. And the topic is to live with the crimes of our past. This event will be streamed, and there will be also, it will be taped as well, so you can enjoy that afterwards, listening to it once more. The conversation will be in English. And practicalities, if you haven't done it yet, could you please switch off your mobiles into silent or switch it off completely? And the emergency exits you find here and there. And we are very much looking forward to hear your thoughts and your ideas about difficult topics in terms as criminals, culprits, victims, justice, punishment, and more. Thank you very much, and enjoy the evening.
Well, thank you, Sabine, for that lovely introduction, and thank you, everybody, for coming. There are a lot of competing events. We're really happy that you are our audience tonight, exactly you. To live with the crimes of the past presupposes the idea that the past is not something that we leave behind. It's not something that we forget. It's not something that we can just ignore in order to concentrate on the future or the present, for that matter. On the contrary, the past is something we carry with us as individuals, but also as different kind of collectives. Communities, nations, peoples, in languages, in cultures, we carry the past with us. It comes back to haunt us, as it's often said. It lives on in the present. It lives on in our memory in different ways. In texts, in memorials, in rituals, in things we do and things we say. The other thing we're going to sort of talk about is, what if we think about the past as crime, as a set of crimes, as something that violent, brutal acts that have perpetrators and victims, where there's guilt and where there's judgment and where there's punishment and atonement. What kind of idea about the past is that? And then finally, I think there's also part of this conversation is going to be the question how that very sort of sophisticated and interesting vocabulary that the German public German academics and German authors have developed, intellectuals have developed in thinking about the crimes of the past. Erinnerungskultur, Vergangenheitsbewältigung, Erinnerungspolitik. Can we in Norway have use of this language? I mean, we have our own pasts to deal with. We have recently been discussing the deportation of Norwegian Jews a lot. We've had a terrorist attack that killed 77 people. We have our own traumatic past. So one question that we're going to raise, I think, is also is this language that has been developed in the German context, can it also be useful for us? So that's sort of the big framework for the conversation, I think. And I'm very happy to have my two guests to be able to talk about this. And I thought we should just start, because what we all know about you, both of you, is that you've taken a strong interest in different versions of the German past. The past in general, but the German past in particular. So I just wanted you to say something at the beginning, sort of why this interest in the past and why this interest in the German past. And well, let's start with you, Volker.
Okay, the interest in the German past is, I think, because I'm German. So, and the interest in this particular past in 1933 and the following years, and a few years before, it's just because I always had this question in mind, why did this happen in Germany? How did it happen that a civilized country, turns in such a dictatorship, and every moralic and other topics just were turned around in a few years, and I can't understand, really. There are many explanations from historians and so on, and they're all very good, but it's not an answer. You know, there's always a rest of a doubt, always a why remaining, and this, for me, this is the main reason to write my novels. Yeah. And I started in 1929 to see what happens with the Republic in Germany back then. It was not such a bad republic, the Weimar Republic. It was a very good republic, but not so many Democrats, maybe. But it could have worked, but it didn't. And I asked myself why, and why was it? Did it find such an end, and why the Nazis were the ones who followed? And I think it's the worst case scenario what happened then, and this is what I try to get a little bit closer to this question by the way of fiction. Right. Because in fiction you have empathy, you can you are in the role of other people and look through their eyes. The people back then, we didn't know what happened the next year. You didn't know the future. You know, for us, their future is the past already. We know much more things than they didn't know, and this I wanted to see it by myself and to show how this feels when things change in such a way. And I hope that many people who read these books, they ask themselves, like I do, what would I have done back then? And maybe what would I do today if similar changes come to our society?
Right.
So, you're a journalist, so you're used to sort of following things as they unfold. And I mean, you've been a journalist in periods where quite dramatic things have unfolded, not yet similar to the events that Volker has been writing about, but still. So how is the German past important for the kind of work you've been doing for the last 10, 15 years?
To me, it's important because I'm of course concerned about the past, but I'm mainly concerned about how to deal with it. When these most horrible things have happened, how is it possible to live with that? How can the Germans live on knowing what they did and what sort of responsibility they had? These questions are my main concern. And you can see today, if you follow European politics today, and of course also German politics, you can see how important the war still is, and how dealing with the war is still part of how the EU is working, what is happening, the conflicts between East and West. It's all sort of linked to the war, if you want to look at it that way, which is just one perspective of many, but it's a very useful perspective, I think, and it's also a lesson in things take time. And it's not like you can just decide, now we put an end to this and we move on. You just have to wait until the next generation, maybe even the next generation, to sort of get a new perspective and a new beginning. Or maybe you can never have a real new beginning, but it takes a lot of time.
Could you give us sort of a concrete example, recent example of what you're talking about now? How does the past directly impact European politics as it unfolds today? Could you be concrete about that?
A really concrete example is how now Poland and Greece are asking Germany for war reparations, which is it's very concrete. I mean, they have the numbers ready. Especially in Poland, this has been a subject for maybe 15 years. They have the numbers, they know exactly what they want, and they bring it up again and again. And it's very difficult because in a way, I think it was the German president who wrote some years ago about Greece. It was during the big crisis in Greece that they are also partly right. So it's not like you can just say, no, this is just populist arguments or something. It's something there. But at the same time, it's pragmatically almost impossible.
Right.
Because what should you bankrupt Germany then to pay for the war now? Which is, it's different people, But this is a concrete example. And it's very, I don't know how it's in Greece, but I've been to Poland a lot lately, and it's felt.
Yeah.
A lot of people feel this. Yeah.
I think the idea of reparation is interesting because it brings us back to the question that something was committed that is similar to a crime. And reparations is it's a kind of punishment or atonement, at least. It's something you pay for your crimes, you pay reparations. So then, I mean, the interesting thing here, one of the interesting things about talking with you, Volker, is that you have decided, in one way or another, you'll have to explain this, to think about the past in terms of crime. I mean, in terms of certain acts criminal acts, be they petty, be they like prostitution and drugs, or be they capital crimes like murder, or be they state crimes like the killing of the communists or the civilians in the Blutmai in 29. So what does it mean, do you think? Also in light of this idea about reparations, to think about the past in terms of crimes that we need to deal with, that we need to be punished for, that we need to feel guilt for.
Yeah, first, I wanted to write crime stories, because you can show society very good with crime stories, and it's the main thing to me to show how society changes. And some years very, very quickly, sometimes a little bit slowly, sometimes you see everything, sometimes you don't realize, and I want to show all these things, and of course, as the police is very, very important because it's executive of the regime, and it's an interesting fact that the Berlin police it didn't change very much, you know. In the Kaiserreich, it was the same police. In the Republic, and then in Nazi Germany, mostly were the same policemen.
Right.
A few people were changed out, but the rest worked. And this is very disturbing, you know.
Is that sort of Heinrich Mann der Untertan? Is that the kind of story that sort of that
maybe
mentality was the same?
sometimes, yeah, maybe it's a kind of mentality. I don't know. I don't really know if it's just only a German problem, that such things.
No,
maybe it's back then it was, of course. But yeah, it's Pflichtgefühl. I don't know the English word, but maybe it doesn't.
Duty.
Yeah, duty. Yeah, of course. And but it sounds even more.
Pflicht sounds better than duty.
Pflichtgefühl.
I
It's,
agree.
yeah, it sounds like a real German word. And so they went on, and I have to follow my orders and so on. And then it ended in the first Einsatzgruppen shoot Jews behind the front in Poland.
Yeah.
Were policemen.
Yeah.
It was not SS, not soldiers. It were policemen. And that's,
Polizeibataillon,
yeah.
this and this. Yeah.
and that's one of the things I don't understand.
Yeah.
And these people who did this, most of them didn't like to do this. Some of them were sadists, you know. It's in such a regime, people like sadists, they can climb up, but most of them were normal policemen, and suddenly they stand there and shoot Jews. And they thought, it's my duty. This is the enemy of my people, I have to shoot them. It's very perverted, but I think many of them thought like this. And then how this change of thinking can take place, this is something I want to look at, you know, because I can't imagine such things for myself. But it worked. I think it were people like me, like you, like everyone here, who changed into Nazis. They don't fall from the sky. We're ordinary people became Nazis.
But this is also something I found so dramatic when I discovered in German history that in 1968, when there was the student protest, and they of course shouted Nazi cops, and they did also in other countries, but in Germany it was true. I mean, it was the concrete police people were sometimes also old Nazis, and this makes it so strong. The history,
It was the same in the German Democratic Republic, but they were
Yeah,
communists,
of course,
but
of
were
course.
sometimes the
Yeah,
same
of
people.
course.
They had the same problem, but
Absolutely,
they thought, okay, we always were anti-fascists, so we have
Yeah.
not. That's a problem.
Yeah.
The fascists
They just
are in the
decided,
West, but
yeah.
no,
Yeah.
it was on both of both sides of the war.
Yeah.
There were,
Yeah.
they were Nazis.
Yeah, and I mean, it's also one of the discussions that we've been having in Norway about the deportation of the Jews. What was the real role of the Norwegian police? I mean, it's also a question of the police. Were they just forced by the Nazis to do it? Could they have warned the Jews? Could they have acted differently? So, I mean, the question of sort of the loyalty of police officers to what kind of ideal seemed to be sort of a question that has very much to do with sort of the logic of totalitarian societies, I guess, in a very basic sense. So, I mean, you were relating to this, and we can pick it up now. That when we talk about the German past, we do also talk about the double past. I mean, there's the experience of two totalitarian states, basically. The Third Reich and the GDR, the ideology of National Socialism and the ideology of socialism. And I mean, there's when these are discussed, it's often a certain symmetries. This is given, at least in historical writing, a certain symmetry. So that cruelty on one side, cruelty on the other. So how do you maybe Ingrid, you've been looking at Europe after the fall of the wall. So how do you see that sort of that doubleness, that those two German paths? How are they linked or not? Are they symmetrical? How should we think about that? those double pasts?
I don't know. It's very. It's a popular sport to compare and count who many died and who was killed in different. Yeah, I don't think that's so useful. But what is very interesting to see is that Germany are rightfully, I think, getting a lot of how do you say it, Rus. They are being praised for being the best in the world with dealing with the past. And this is, of course, mostly related to the Nazi regime, and it's very true, because they are admitting it, they are taking responsibility, they are saying this to the world whenever it is needed. They travel around to the countries all around Europe, and they say the things they need to, which is very important. And also back home, it's research, it's, you know, everything, it's displayed, this is how it was. And then when you come to the communist time, they of course apply the same, but they forget that it's recent. So it's like now, you should also, this should also now be over. Now you're part of the new democracy and everything should be okay. But what you see is that it just takes time. It's the same. It takes time, and it's not been enough time yet. And you can see it in the political divisions. You see it very clearly when you look at where are the right-wing populists popular. It's of course all over Germany, but it's a big difference. They are much more. They can even. There will be elections in 3 of the former DDR. In the former DDR, 3 of the states, and AfD could be the biggest one, at least in Saxon, which is very dramatic. And it has to do with this, I think. It has to do with other things as well, but it's still this. And in Western Germany, I think it's sort of, they don't have any patience with this. It's like you should be grateful, or it's an attitude, or they don't know, and there are other things to think about. But it's there, yeah.
Yeah, you live in Cologne, so that's in Tiefen Westen.
It's really Western Germany, yes.
So maybe you can.
This is a problem because it was the Wiedervereinigung. I don't know the English word. Reunification. Yeah, well, sounds good. It was like taking over Eastern Germany by Western Germany, and this is not good, because there were some biographies and many people also were victims in the GDR, and they wanted freedom, and yeah. So it was not very healthy how this grew together, and I hope that time will solve many problems. I know many East German people, and mostly in Berlin. Maybe it's a little other in Berlin than in Saxonia or so, I don't know. But they live in democracy, they live in the Western world, you know, and it works. But also, I think it's mostly, not only, but some older people, they lived half their life, and then 1989, someone said, okay, all what you did till now was all wrong. And that's not so easy to deal with, I think.
Yeah. And it's also very different. Exactly what you said, they lived their lives for decades in this other system, which of course never happened in the Nazi side, because it was short. So the effects of this sort of life is different.
It's different, and I think you can't relate GDR to Nazi Germany. There's a big difference. There are similarities, of course, like uniforms and so on, and dictatorship, but it's not the same. So
it's not the same, of course.
And so you can't relate communist Germany with Nazi Germany, I think. And so you have to deal with it in a different way. And I don't think in the 1950s in Western Germany people didn't talk about the past. It's over now. We look forward. We have our Wirtschaftswunder and democracy. Sometimes I think Germans always want to be the best. We are the best Nazis. We are the best Democrats, and we are best in Vergangenheitsbewältigung. Yeah,
And in trade.
yeah, and this is not, the word Vergangenheitsbewältigung. I don't like it. We talked about this, and then because it sounds to me like you can, deal a little bit with the past, and then it's done now.
We're now talking about the word Vergangenheitsbewältigung. Can you hear? Can you hear us in the back? Yes. It's fine. Yeah. So I was just wondering if you would. Yeah.
You can't overcome the past. The past is always there. I told you about William Faulkner. The past is not dead. It's not even past. That's a very true sentence. I think it's always with us, and we have always to deal with it. And Bewältigung sounds like I do it, and then it's done, and I go on to the next job. And that's not what it has to be like.
No.
Yeah.
But still, you can see, even of course, it's not like it's not something that is finished, but you can see how it has the phases. At first, like you said, after the war, it was like just try not to think about it, not to talk about it, and then came the '68 generation, where it was like we really need to know what our parents did during the war, and then all this came, and then 10 years later, it came this Holocaust television series, American, where suddenly, or not suddenly, but then it was possible to start to talk about Holocaust in a new way. And then after the reunification, you got this new political establishment way of dealing with this very proper, very true.
Like a Erinnerungskultur. It's like a ritual,
exactly.
and it's all very important to do this. Don't get me wrong; it's very important. It's more important than to put it in two words like Erinnerungskultur and Vergangenheitsbewältigung, because it's a thing. It should be just normal to think about the past and not to put it in some rituals like Erinnerungskultur. You should teach all the young people, and so it's very, very important. You should visit the concentration camps. It is very important, but it doesn't have to. The word Kultur, it sounds like a ritual, and the ritual. I'm Catholic. You go to church. I can't. I know everything, but it's very, very empty. It doesn't have every meaning to me. These rituals, and this, I think, it's maybe a little danger. This shouldn't happen to these topics. That it's an empty ritual, and Nazis again. Okay, I know. You don't have to think about this like this. It's very important. It's not only about that we have to think about it because our ancestors did this to the world. It's also very important to think about it that it doesn't happen again. Not only in Germany, it's everybody should think about this history.
Right.
Yeah.
It's interesting, though, that we have. I mean, there are a few German concepts that travel the world that are never translated, and one, of course, is Bildung, and with that Bildungsroman. And the other set of words is it's Vergangenheitsbewältigung, Erinnerungskultur. These words that are never really translated into English just pop up because they cannot really be translated because they're so much a part of a German way of thinking, maybe. But I wanted to sort of to see if we could locate our discussions not just in time but in space. And take us to a city I think we all have, and you said the key word earlier, it's a city we all have lived in and have close relationship to, and also a city that seems to embody this idea of the present, the present of the past and the present, if you want, the presence of the past in a very sort of physical and symbolical and iconographic even way, namely Berlin. It seems to be a city. For me, it was this city when I moved there in the 1990s where I suddenly realized what it meant to live with the past. in a very physical way, because it was there in the street names, in the streets, in the buildings. It was basically everywhere. So the whole abstract idea that I had from Norway, that living with the past was sort of something about learning in school about the Viking kings or sort of the 1814, it was suddenly sort of, there was a physical presence of the past that are quite astonishing, I think, in a very sort of interesting and educative learning experience for someone coming from outside to experience that. And I mean, you both, in both your lives and your writings, Berlin play an important part. So I want us to talk about that. Berlin as the capital of the past and the present, if you want. So Ingrid, you've lived there and you've been important for you in so many ways. Can you
Absolutely, and it's where because before I used to be, I wrote about literature and I also reviewed books, but after I discovered Berlin, I changed and started to write about politics, and I got my interest in history just from living in Berlin, because what happened, of course, is when you see there are bullet holes in the houses, it's so extremely dramatic. And also here was the wall, still is part of it, and I got, of course, the feeling that when you walk in the streets, when you see some old people, you don't know what they lived through. Also, you still, it's really also there still less and less, of course, from the war, but also from the communist regime. You see all these people and you think, okay, they have completely other experiences, that they come from, So it's very concrete, and also it's this idea that Berlin is today the powerhouse of Europe, and I think also very much the symbolic of hope and change, and how it has been the blackest black, and now it's, I wouldn't say the whitest white, but it's but it's the most democratic. I mean, they are really they have learned from history also in the politics, and the ideals of democracy are maybe nowhere as strong, which I think is also very hopeful for all of us, that you can really change and learn and
But what it was in the 20s too. Berlin was the Nazi capital, but it was after 1933. In the years before, it was a very red town with social democrats and communists as well, and not a right-wing town. The Nazis came from Munich. I always have to say this. It's not from Berlin, not from Cologne, but there was a power. So of course, the Nazis came to power, and they used everything that was there in Berlin to hold their power and to spread it all over Europe and so on. But Berlin is, as a town, is not a Nazi town. It was this 12 years, but it's from its character, it's always a worker city. And it's maybe also a democratic city. In these years from 1919 to 1932, it was a very democratic city. And you know, Prussia, the country of Prussia, it was the biggest country in Germany. It was the most democratic country. It was a stable democracy from 1919 to 1932. And now we don't know this because Prussia is always evil. There was a militarism and so on, and it was also a side of Prussia, but in these years it was, if the so-called Preußenschlag, I don't want to talk too much about history, but it was, the Germany wasn't really democratic in 1932, and Franz von Papen, who was chancellor, he is so-called Preußenschlag, the social democratic Minister President Braun in Prussia, it was two-thirds of Germany. Absetzen. He deposed him, and so the Reich government ruled Prussia too, and it was half a year before Hitler was made chancellor. Without this thing, maybe also history would take another direction. You know, there are so many Zufälle, coincidences that become influential in history. So it's not always the big things, events. It's always sometimes like Donald Trump, who would have thought of that he would be American president a few years ago, but he is now. So these things change history too. And so it was in Germany. So just what I wanted to say, Berlin was not always black, and Prussia too. There's always many sides, and we must learn to see every side.
Yeah.
Also, GDR was not of everything bad. But I don't want to get in the wrong direction, not to say, okay, Hitler built the Autobahn. That's not what I meant. But you have to see things very differently.
But it's true, and this is also, I think, a very important lesson from history, that you should definitely never think in black and white. You should always try to see the nuances and the spectrum. This is very important.
And talk about everything.
And talk about
say, okay,
yes, true.
No, but better not. Like Turkey and Armenians also. Many countries have their black holes. We don't mention the war, like they say, no. And you have to talk about everything.
I just don't want to leave Berlin quite yet, because one of the stunning things in your experience in Berlin is that politics change, right? Politics, social movements change, but many buildings stay the same. I find that incredibly fascinating. So, so when you enter the finance department now, you basically enter to the building built for Hermann Göring in the 30s to house his Reichsluftfahrtministerium. I mean, this is one example. And the fact that you move, that sort of the city, the stuff of the city, the material of the city remains, but it can house very, very different people, obviously, different ideologies, different dreams and hopes and anxieties.
It was Haus der Ministerien in the GDR, this same building. In the GDR, it was Haus der Ministerien. There were many Ministerien in this house too, and the communism. So every time used it. So, do you think this sort of is that a problem for Berlin for the future? Can you build a future-oriented democratic capital while still moving into the old structures of?
They already have.
I mean, but will it work in the long run?
Yes, I think definitely. No, but because it's very interesting, because maybe you know. The topography, yes, the towers. Because it's a very interesting example, because it used to be Gestapo Hauptquartier. Then after the war it wasn't there, and it was nothing there. And they wanted to build just normal housing in the 70s. And then it was like the people protested and say, we cannot pretend this is a normal place. It's not a norm. It's just not an empty spot. It's somewhere. So then they fought, and after I think 10 years or something, they started to build this.
So the basement was always there. You can watch it, and they build a building for the exhibitions now. So
also what you can see in Berlin is you can see what you said, that these buildings that has had different functions during the times, but you can also see a lot of fights about what these buildings and places should be. And now you have I don't want to start talking about it, but the city castle, which is something I feel strongly about. But it's irrelevant here. But you can see also how it's not only about the buildings, it's about the people, and how there have always been this sort of...
Yes, this change. You have buildings of every period, and the castle. I think there was I don't know in English, Palast der Republik, Palace of Republic. I don't know from the GR. They turned it down and built now. I think you should have it should have been left there. Also maybe it's ugly. Not everyone likes it, but it's part of history of this city.
Exactly.
And so it's important, and I think it works, that now in the Bundesfinanzministerium, this is an old Goebbels ministry, but you always are remembered when you go in this building, that has another past. I think.
Yeah.
I hope so.
Yeah.
That's
Yeah,
people think so. And you know, your example with Topografie des Terrors, a few meters away there's a Vossstraße, where the big building Reichskanzlei, yeah, the big spare building was there, and it was. And there are in East Germany built there just normal flats and nothing. Just remember that there was the Führerbunker and everything.
Yeah, yeah.
You know, and I think this is wrong. There had to be something like Topografie des Terrors too. You know, at this place, but it isn't.
And on the other hand, it's probably very exhausting for Berliners to always have to deal with this history thing. And I mean, it's very interesting for us when we arrive, but I think also that they can never be free of it, or they try just to live in their little part of the city and not think about it all the time. Because it's also, I mean, I think you also have to respect that you cannot always think about these things.
Of course, you have to live your normal life too.
Yeah.
But it's not only in Berlin that you have the relics of Nazism. You know, in many official German buildings, you have these big eagles, and there's a circle. And what circle? There was a swastika in the circle a few years ago. The swastika was a hammer. You put it away, and then so you can use that building.
Because this is also something you experience when you, at least I know also other Norwegian people who have been to Germany and studied this, they meet Germans who can start to cry because they feel still guilty about things now. And they have nothing to do with it, but it's also this is the other part of this.
Yeah, but I think crying doesn't help, you know. But
no, but it's something. I mean,
think about it and maybe feel guilty. Yeah, of course. But
it's part.
You are not personally responsible for the things happened back then, but we are responsible for the things which happen now and will happen in the future. That's a more important thing.
Of course, but what is you are of course right, but it's something that is also emotional or impressive or whatever for me to see.
Okay,
that for some Germans or many, I don't know how many, the burden of living with this past is it's also personal.
It's not wrong to be emotional. You know, I write novels. It's the way I want to catch the people with emotion and so on. But it's not the only thing. You know, you have to do more than just only cry. That's what I wanted to say.
So, Sabine, can you tell me how much time we have left?
15 minutes.
Oh, that's wonderful. Because I want us to sort of. I want just to ask you a blunt question, I think. And you can start with responding in the way you feel. And I mean, it's a question that goes 2,000 years back, maybe. And it's sort of simple, but still needs to be asked. And it's the question, can we learn from history?
Should I start?
Yeah, I think you should. I think you should.
Yes. Yeah, I think so.
So how?
No,
it doesn't repeat itself, right? That's the problem. So we can't really.
It doesn't. That's right. It doesn't repeat itself. So I always say we are now not live in Weimar Germany. When some people say, "Okay, AfD, the new Nazis," it's not as simple as that. It's more difficult because there are some Nazis in the AfD, but it's not a Nazi party like the NSDAP was. It's just a little bit different, and many things are different. You know, economy in Germany we are a rich country now. Back then it was a very poor country, and so on and so on. There are many things you can't compare just easily. So there are no, in Germany the beautiful word Patentrezepte. There's no easy way to solve these problems, but I think it's important to see there are problems, and maybe there are possibilities to make the same mistakes the people did back then, and we have to be aware to do not the same mistakes. And I think one of the main problems also back then in Germany, but now maybe even a bigger problem, is not the enemies of democracy, but Gleichgültigkeit, indifference. Yeah, that was all. The indifference of the people to say, I don't care about politics. I have my freedoms and everything, but it's there's a reason why we have these freedoms all over the Western world, and this is democracy, and this has to be a strong democracy, and we have to defend it, and we have to be aware of this. And what we maybe can learn from the Weimar years in Germany, how fast it goes, that democracy is just got away. And it's a very, very fragile thing. And yeah, and we have to maybe even to fight for it, but we have to stand for it. And it's not a Selbstverständlichkeit. I don't know. It's not
Obvious.
not obvious. Yeah, it's just another word. You can't translate that.
It shouldn't be taken for granted, I think.
For granted, yeah, yes, that's the
word
right expression. Yeah, it shouldn't be taken for granted because many people fought for it in many countries and died for it. Even in Germany, in the war against the Germans, that we in West Germany we got our democracy, and so yeah, I think we have to do something for it, and everyone, and that's not only the right-wing people, everyone who talks and acts against it, we have to, in Germany, klop him auf die Finger, to say, no, stop. No. That's maybe a lesson.
I don't know if you remember the book that came out by Timothy Snyder a couple of years ago that was called On Tyranny, which was basically a book about how Hitler came to power, but formulated in lessons that were, I mean, he didn't name Trump in every sentence, but it was clear that he was saying that, well, here are some lessons that we should learn from what happened in the 30s. Have a private life, defend democracy, be politically engaged. I mean, all these kinds of things. And so, Ingrid, what do you think? Do you? I mean, you've written historical books. And it would be. Let's ask the question differently. You've written about Angela Merkel. Is she learning from history? You think? Is history sort of something she uses in any way, or at least is it with her when she makes her decisions about the future of Germany and Europe?
I would never pretend to know anything about
Oh,
what Angela Merkel is thinking, but I would think so, yes, because she is an intellectual, and because she has also always read lots and lots of books, also about history. So I'm sure that she thinks about these things, and and it's also sort of. Because what would it be like if we couldn't learn anything from history? I mean, where would that leave us? It's like, well, we start now, and we start now, and we start now. It's always there. It doesn't mean that we will never make the same mistakes, but in some way we always learn something. But I'm not sure, because now when you see the right-wing populists coming, and if you draw the parallels to the Weimar Republic or something, of course it's completely different. You can't really do that. But what you can learn is that, like a little bit, as you said, there are all these small steps, one little step, one little step, one little step, and someone has to say this is a little thing that is sort of equal. And but I don't.
Yeah.
It's more like, and what I think also is that what we can learn is that passivity. When a lot of people are too passive, because in Weimar Republic, I think it was also this idea among intellectuals that politics that were like vulgar thing. It was not something you should deal with too much. But that you have to overcome this, and you live in a society, and it's like your human duty to be politically engaged somehow. I mean it can be in the school or in the school board, or it doesn't have to be like national politics or anything.
No.
But you live
It's
in a
everywhere,
society with other
yeah.
people, and you should be engaged. And it doesn't have to be more complicated than that. This you can learn from history. Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, obviously, this is clear, and we agree that we have to learn from history. There's nothing else we can learn from. We should be engaged. But I mean, to be a bit more, to press the point a bit more. So yes, we can learn from history, and some of us are engaged in writing, in producing works that might also have that role to help. So to help people to learn from history. So I mean, do you? I mean, Volker, when you write your books, do you want to teach people? Do you want to teach your readers history?
No.
In order for them to not do what happened in the 30s?
I'm not a
Not
teacher.
succumb to the
I'm
same
not a
thing?
teacher, and I don't want to teach. But I want to gain interest. The people should be interested in history. They should realize history does matter. It's very important to know about history. You know, I don't write history books to teach the people history. No. It's I don't explain everything. I don't explain very little. It's for my characters. It's all obvious what happens there because they live in this world. So I don't explain very much. But if you get curious by reading my books, you can. We have internet. I have a website where you can look some things, and so you can learn. You can see, and I think it's very, very, very important to care about history. And if you don't, like Donald Trump or many other, it's not good. You make not only the same mistakes, the same words, like Lügenpresse, it's the German word for fake news. Maybe it was the same word the Nazis said in the 20s. Yeah. And a word like völkisch, I don't even know how to translate it.
Untranslatable.
It means race. It's a racist word for national. It means. Yeah, and Frauke Petri from the AfD said, "Oh no, völkisch is just a normal word. It's a German term for national." But it isn't. It has a history. Words have a history too, and you can't use them as they were innocent. They aren't, and that's all these things are very important, and you have to know about. So you have to not only to deal with, you have to read and learn history. It's important. Yeah.
So I think before we end, we have only a couple of minutes left, and this is, I think, a question for us more than for Volker Ingrid. I mean, we are now we've had huge discussions about how to commemorate the losses at Utøya. We have big questions about keeping the government buildings, tearing them down. What kind of memorials should we build? Could we have memorials that offend people? What should they look like? Who should they be for? I mean, these are, I mean, so far it isn't going very well. I mean, we aren't doing this very well. We're not succeeding very well in coping with these questions. So I guess one question about learning is, could we learn from recent German history in the attempt to deal with the traumatic past in our current ongoing work to deal with our own recent traumatic past, and in that case, how?
So I think Norway, I don't know if I should say the Norwegian government, but Norway made the typical mistake in thinking that now there has been, 4 years or something, now we can put up the monument and we can move on. And this is a way of also signaling we are now finished with this. We don't want to talk about it too much because it's painful and it's very difficult. and we set up the monument, and we move on. And it's this way of trying to control it from above, maybe, or make it should happen in this way, when it's actually way too early. That's my opinion. It's different with the government building, because these are the wounds of what happened, and it's you have to make these decisions. Maybe you can't just leave this sort of decisions forever. But like the monument history with the neighbors and all these things could be avoided by waiting some years, or by saying that now we make because there were some very provisional good ways of doing this, but it was like we should be the best in class also with this. We had a very good, because in a way it was very successful. He was caught, and it was a good process in courts. But then this sort of thing, I don't know, but it was not what you could learn from what is erinnerungskultur, I think.
Folke, do you have any... I mean, you've said that we can't come to terms with the past. We now have a recent traumatic past that we need to live with. Do you have any... I don't want to give advice, but is there anything you can sort of... What's the...
No, I can't give any advice. No. Just it's important to face history and the past. That's the most important thing. And I think if you do this, that's the most important thing, to do this. And the rest maybe will work then. I don't know.
I think this is a good place to end this conversation. I think it's been important. That's the best thing we can say about it, I think. It's been an interesting...
Helge, I'm tempted to say, break the rules, don't obey the schedule, keep talking, because that's very important. Can I say two more things?
Yeah.
It was very interesting to watching you, the audience, and the people on stage from the sideline, because I think there's hope. There's a hope in a political landscape that is changing dramatically. Why? Because we were talking about that it's so difficult to translate the term Erinnerungskultur. And this you have filled with meaning on stage. You know, when you're on holidays and you can't think of the right English, Norwegian, or whatever word, body language, filling something with what you just demonstrated on stage. Thank you very much, and I do hope you enjoyed it. You give feedback, and you want a question and answers next time there is a new festival, and it's up to you to demand that. That there should be a German-Norwegian festival, literature festival, at least a week or something like that, so that you have time to talk. Thank you very much, and we have... We have some small souvenirs, both for our Norwegian hosts and our German guests.
Thank you.
And I do hope you have you feel like it, and you have the energy to attend more. There's more tonight, and there's more tomorrow. And we are very, very happy that Herr Kutscher is going to be here at 12 o'clock tomorrow. Sunday is a good time, 12 o'clock, to talk about something else, which you were probably also longing for, Babylon Berlin. Yeah? Have a good night.